Hey guys, still here, and welcome back to Wargame Red Dragon, Ash and Shadows. Today I'm looking at the India deck. Now, important note before I kick off this Armory review is that I'm looking at version 2.40.4, which means that artillery can now be targeted by seed, and that your deck layout has been changed in the sense that you now only have 3 tank slots, unless you're using a specialized deck such as Armored or Mechanized, which provides you with a few more. Anyway, with those changes or with those notifications out of the way, let's have a look at India. This is the deck that was, or the country that was most upvoted through the poll. If you want to vote for another country, be sure to do so through the link in the description down below, as comments on here will just be ignored. Now, India. It's a very interesting deck because it takes units from both east and west. You have red 4 and blue 4 units combined in one deck. Now, India normally isn't in the game. It's taken over the slot that used to be the Dutch deck. And that means that if you want to play this deck, you're going to have to get the Dutch DLC. Now, a couple of units that I'll probably not be able to pronounce the names of, so bear with me on those. For now, we have the Adesh Dasta. This is command infantry. They have quite some interesting transports, such as the Duff, which is the Dutch transport. Then they have a Kestrel, or a Kestrel. They use, I believe, the Dutch YPR model. Quite mobile, does come with an APS. BTR 50, that's a red 4 unit, just a standard armored, or well, lightly armored tracked vehicle. The BMP 1, with Conkers and the Grom. And the BMP 2 Sarath, armed with a concourse, an autocannon, and a machine gun. Pretty heavily armored, not amphibious, so keep in mind that you cannot just float them across, as you can do with some of these other vehicles, I believe. Yeah, the BMP 1 is amphibious. And then we have the Abhai. This is an interesting unit. It's a pretty heavily armored IFV, which also comes with the Bofors L70 as well as the CICS Heavy, so it has an APS. And next we have for transports the Mi-17 V5. Pretty fast, 250 kph, not as fast as some of the other helos, but at least you're not, or you don't seem to be paying for it as much as you do with the others. Next up, Laro CO, just your standard command vehicle. You also have the YP408 PWCO, another command unit. I think it's pretty expensive at 110 points, considering that most of the command vehicles are just 80 points. This one has a bit of armor, but I think it's overpriced, especially if you compare it to a 110 point command tank. Because for 110 points, and I'm not sure what the availability difference is on these, you can have a T-72 which has 18 frontal armor and 9 side, versus 2 and 2. And surely the thing has less speed, 80 versus 70, but the autonomy on the T-72 command is far better, 700 versus 300. It also comes with a pretty punchy gun, which it can be used to deal with enemy infantry. But other than that, I'd say that the choice is easy in this matter. Take a command tank. Then you have your FOB, as well as a couple of command vehicles. Oh yeah, there's the YPR 765, another command vehicle, so they are definitely not hurting for command vehicle options. We have the LAMV Logi. Don't look at the unit model. This used to be a Dutch unit card, but it is not a Dutch transport for logistics. The model that tends to be used is, I'm not sure what the LAMV is, but I'd say it looks like either the German or the French vehicle. And it's an amphibious logistics unit, which is very interesting because I don't believe that you have too many of those. We also have a Stallion, an Mi-26, and just look at the difference. Boom, there's your Mi-26. And we have the AW101 Cargo. Nice and fast helo, a lot smaller and a lot cheaper than the Mi-26. Moving on to infantry. We have two different variants of an AT solution. We have the ATM Cornet. Now the Cornet is a 2730 meter range missile, 27 AP, You're going to outrange tanks as they're coming at you. Not for too long, but it should be long enough to do at least a significant portion of damage to them, unless they're packing an APS. In which case, you're going to have to fire quite a few missiles at them before you actually hurt them. Next up, we have the Spike. Now, the Spike in the version when I reviewed it for the Israeli deck was not that good. This is the Spike LR2. This one is good. This is a missile that you can use both against infantry and vehicles, AP as well as HE, and it's fire and forget, as opposed to the Cornet, which is a guided weapon, and you have to just keep an eye on the target. This one, if your infantry dies in the meanwhile as a missile is in the skies, you can still hit. As for transports, we have the Kestrel, we have the Sarath, which I already covered, the Abhai, the Haldruv, standard or seemingly very standard transport helo, and the Mi-17 V5. Then we have the Garud Commandos. These guys come with the Tavor Tar-21, the Installazzo C90 M3, which is a pretty potent anti-tank weapon, but it's not as powerful as some of the other options that you have, because it only does 21 points of AP damage. Its rate of fire is very good, and they carry a good number of these things. They're elite trained at 15-man squad, so you're going to have a lot of firepower between these guys. I'd say these guys are too cheap if it wasn't for the fact that they don't have a heavy tag. That heavy tag makes all the difference. And fortunately, they do have plenty of other infantry that does have other units, or that does have the heavy tag. There's one new transport that I haven't covered, which is the TH495. A KBA-25 autocannon, an APS, and a machine gun on this thing, and 4 front and side armor. Next up is the Gatak Force. These guys do have the heavy tag. They're a really interesting bunch. They have the Excalibur, a battle rifle, pretty accurate, 60%. Then they have the Carl Gustav M3, which has a far lower rate of fire than the weapon that I just showed you, the Installazza. And they have the GL25. This is a grenade launcher. They have a lot of ammunition for that thing, 350 rounds. Now, keep that in mind, as I'm going to be comparing them quickly to the SEALs, which are one of those other rare units that have a grenade launcher. Where are the SEALs? Here are the SEALs. The SEALs have a 40mm grenade launcher. This is only a 25mm. You're going to find that it does 1 HE damage versus 1.5, but these guys carry 36 rounds. These guys carry 350. So, whereas the SEALs are going to be expending all of their frag launcher ammo inside of 1 minute, with a rate of fire of 34 rounds a minute, the GL25 has a better range and can keep this fire sustained for, well, I'd say a little under 17 minutes, which I don't think they're going to be surviving for that long. Anyway, India infantry. That's the Gatak force. Keep in mind that these guys are very potent. Sorry, I'm going to stop using the word potent. As somebody pointed out in the previous video, I use that way too often. They're a pretty powerful bunch, but not so much against tanks. That rate of fire of 10 rounds a minute worries me. It means that, especially with the higher amount of armor and the higher amount of hit points, an enemy transport, as well as an enemy tank, especially tanks, are going to be much more difficult to deal with. So, while this force is probably very good at dealing with enemy infantry, I would try to leave dealing with vehicles to some other infantry group. Next we have the Gorkhas, not to be confused with the Gurkhas. This is a shock-trained squad, which carries the same weapon as the Spetsnaz. They're not as good. They are shock-trained versus the Spetsnaz Elite. They don't have a heavy tag, as they're going to be taking more damage because of that. But they are a pretty cheap solution if you're dealing with, for example, something like the Gatak Force. Because these guys are going to quickly jump from building to building and fire that RPO right into the infantry squad, which even if you have a heavy tag, is still going to do quite a bit of damage. Then we have the ITA. This is the reservists group. You can see that their anti-tank weapon is pretty trashy. They only carry 6 charges. Good luck hitting with 3 of them. And they have a standard INSAS battle rifle. This is if you just need warm bodies somewhere. But anything else, I wouldn't really trust them with. Next, Kashmiri light rifles. These are the standard rifle group. They also have the INSAS, but I believe that unlike the ITA, they're slightly more accurate with them. You're looking at 30% versus 23 and 15 with a stabilizer versus 10. Their anti-tank weapon is just as terrible as the ITA, but they do have the INSAS LMG, which means that they can put a lot more pressure on enemy infantry. They're very cheap though, 6 points. This is a unit that you use in numbers. And please don't quad stack them, because that's just going to make them an easier target for mortars. But using these guys in groups, especially I'd say in double stacks, you can try and conquer as much of a town as possible just by having these guys in. Or use them as a roadblock while, let's say, the Garut or the Gatak are healing up. As for their transports, I don't really see any new options that I haven't discussed before. Next, the Sikh regiment. The Sikh are an interesting bunch. They have the Galil ACE assault rifle, the Carl Gustav M3, so that's the mediocre anti-tank weapon, and then the Grom 2, which is an anti-air weapon. These, as well as the Stingers down here, make up for the AA infantry division, or the AA infantry options. The Stingers are, I'd say, overpriced. Here's why. The Stingers have slightly less range against airplanes. Accuracy is slightly better. HE is worse, which means that even if you hit one more missile, you're still not going to be doing much more damage. Because 5 hits with the Grom is 30 damage, 6 hits with the Stinger is also 30 damage. But then again, you're not going to be getting 6 hits. They're a 3-man squad. They're regular trained. They have the INSAS, but they don't have an anti-tank weapon. So I think that the Stingers need some attention. I think they're just not as good as the Sikh regiment. Because these guys at least can defend themselves against, well, transports and armor to some extent. So, as a quick summary, you have pretty good infantry, but your short-range anti-tank options are very limited. You don't really have anything that can deal with enemy armor at short range very well. It's not something like what the Russians get with the infantry that has very, very high AP values. You simply don't have those on this tab of the infantry. Keep that in mind, as it's going to become important later on. Your only anti-tank solutions that are really good are the Cornet and the Spike. Neither of these are top attacking missiles. Support. Once again, it looks like the Indians... I'm not even sure if that's the correct term, actually. Cowboys and Indians. No, not really. In the Indian deck, I'm just going to bypass it. In the Indian deck, we have, once again, a shopping spree between the British, the Russians, as well as the South Koreans. The K9 Thunder, which, well, I believe is an altered version of the M109. But I could be wrong on that. So they went shopping across different decks, and this is what they came up with. They have the terrible FV433 Abbott. Low rate of fire, low HE, terrible dispersion, low range. The Gvozdika is better. Its HE is slightly higher, its rate of fire is worse. Range is slightly better, and that's about it. If you really want to hit something, you bring the K9, but keep in mind that the K9, being a more sophisticated artillery unit, can now be hit by seed aircraft. It's locatable. People will know where you are. The Pinaka MBRL is your standard HE missile artillery, and the Smerch is there to deal with enemy armor and vehicles. These two, I know they don't have the right unit picture here. I tested them. You're actually getting a Smerch. You're not getting some sort of M110. Next up, AA. Oh, sorry. This is the last of the artillery units. The Prahar 2. Tactical SRBM, formerly known as the Lance. The Prahar 2, very long-range tactical missile, again can be located, and I wouldn't be surprised if you could shoot this thing down. Still, if it does hit, it's going to do a lot of HE damage. 19, but with a rate of fire of 0 rounds a minute, this means that you're going to be reloading for a long time. AA then, S-125 Pecora. Good range against airplanes, very high HE, only carries 4 missiles, and of course can be located by seed. And I'd say it's not just the seed that's the problem. Because if you have an aircraft that you fire this thing at, and you're trying to relocate from your previous position, then this thing is not going to be too quick about that, because its off-road speed is only 35. The Akash is, comparing it side by side, slightly lower on HE, which is interesting. It does not have an anti-helicopter weapon, so the V600P can still hit helicopters. The Akash 2 cannot, and its range is lower. I'm not really sure why the Akash is only 10 points cheaper, because it carries fewer missiles which have worse stats. I'd say make this thing maybe 50 points. That might make it more competitive. And then we have the Spider. The Spider is another anti-airplane unit that seems to be mostly focused at dealing with helicopters. It can fire the Python SL against helicopters at a range of 3,500 clicks, 3.5 clicks, which means that it's going to outrange most of the ATGMs in the game, with the exception of, I believe, China, which has a 4-kilometer helicopter-mounted ATGM. Anti-airplane, you have both the Derby SL and the Python, although the Python has far less range. And these are small missiles. They have only 5 HE. That's all the damage that they do. Next up, we have the Shilka and the Tunguska. There's not really too much to be said about these units. They're just imported units from Russia. And let's see, this one does have the def tag, which is important, anti-missile defense. The Tunguska will shoot down enemy missiles. I did a game back, I think 1 week ago, maybe 1.5, where I had Challenger Marksman. It also had that def tag. It started shooting down AGGMs that were being fired at the Challenger Marksman. It was a really interesting sight to see. So keep in mind that this thing is not just for dealing with enemy airplanes. You can also use it as a makeshift anti-missile shield. But be careful with it, please. Tanks. Again, shopping all over the place with, I believe, some homegrown tanks. Starting out with the AMX-13 FL-15, pretty terrible unit, especially with units which can one-shot this tank. Now, I believe that's always been the case, but with just 4 armor and 15 strength, you're not really going to be getting much of a result with this tank. And especially considering that it doesn't have a stabilizer. The Arjun, unit model of the Leopard 2. Interesting combination of armament here. You have the L-44 smoothbore, which means that it's going to be doing slightly less damage. It's only 18 AP, but for a 70-point tank that's not bad. It also comes with the Lahat, which is a missile that is usually only placed on Israeli vehicles. 23 AP, meaning that the HGM punches harder than the main gun, but you only carry 3 of them. And while the HGM punches harder than the standard gun, or than the main gun, you're going to be facing the APS. So your missiles have a very good chance of being shot down by the enemy before they hit the tank. That could be a problem, as these things are quite expensive to resupply. Other than that, you have a 17 frontal armor and 9 side with a mag 7.62, and I am assuming it also comes with smoke dischargers, but you don't see those. The Arjun Mark II is an upgraded variant of the Arjun, as I just showed it. The Mark II has a little bit more mobility, 70 versus 55, more frontal armor, more side armor, and a more punchy gun. The AGGM is the same, still the Lahat. This one comes with an APS though. This one doesn't. Then, the T-72 Ayeya, I think. For a 30-point tank, this is a hell of a punchy gun. 19 AP. That's a lot of bang for your buck. Considering that for some of the infantry units, you're paying more for the infantry and their transport than you are paying for one T-72. So this is quite an interesting unit, and I'd say use these if you're going into forests, because they're very cheap, they're very mobile, and with 4 HE, they can rapidly chew through infantry squads, even heavy ones. Then we have the T-72 improved Ayeya. This one comes with a smoke discharger, and it has a little bit more frontal armor, a little bit more punch on the gun, 20 versus 19. Rate of fire is 1 round more per minute. Other than that, you have the smoke dischargers as you have on the standard T-72. Probably more machine guns than are listed at the moment. But I'd say for infantry fighting, so like the push that I showed you Monday, where I was using the Leopards in combination with heavy infantry, I'd say the T-72 Ayeya could have made my life very difficult if I was facing a unit like that. T-72 Ayeya Block 2 is a 95-point version, far more expensive than the 50-point, almost twice as expensive. You're paying for a little bit more frontal armor and an APS, presumably also a smoke discharger, and again, 1 more armor point on the gun, but a little bit more accuracy comes with that. So the stabilizer on this tank is better, actually far better than the one on the T-72 improved. Next, the T-90 Bhishma. This is the heaviest tank they have, which concerns me, because it only has 23 points of armor piercing, or armor penetration, 22 frontal armor, 28 strength. It has the Arena APS and presumably smokescreen dischargers. It's pretty fast off-road, 65. It's a 1996 unit. If this thing goes toe-to-toe with a Russian Armata, you're going to lose quickly. Because this thing has more punch. It's going to pierce your armor with every single shot. And moreover, if you want to start piercing its armor, it's going to mean that you have to close in. And as you close in, the Armata does even more damage to you. This is what concerns me with the India deck. Because you don't really have a super heavy. This is, in the current situation, I'd say somewhere between a heavy and a super heavy. But not much more than that. Consider that the infantry tab also has AT solutions, the Cornet and the Spike, but no short-range AT. So where are we going to find that, I wonder? Anyway, the last is the Vyanta. Looks like an important British tank. Not very good. Terrible off-roading. Probably a Centurion by the looks of it. 11 AP, 3 HE. Please, for the love of God, get the T-72. This 5-point price tag makes it far, far better. Look at that. More accuracy, a better stabilizer, more AP. Not just a little bit, but 8 points more AP. 1 more point of HE, which is going to make a lot of difference when you're dealing with enemy infantry. And yes, you might have slightly less armor, But at least this thing can take a hit and then back the hell off. This thing can take a hit, maybe two, but then it dies where it sits because it's only half the speed of the T-72. Moving on to recon then. Quite a few options here, mostly vehicles, not so much infantry. BMR2 Indra, Bushmaster 2 on this thing, 40 point good optics vehicle, pretty mobile, medium stealth as you would have it with most recon units, and that Bushmaster could be very interesting. 5 points of AP is going to make quite an impact on the enemy. T-55 Rico, also known as Recon, nice and punchy, 17 AP. Still not as good as what you're looking at with that T-72 that I just showed you at 19. But it's an overall pretty good scouting tank. It has a bit of armor, just 11 points. It's not going to win any contests on that part. Doesn't come with an APS. So if you have a stray ATGM and this thing catches it, it's going to actually catch it. It doesn't miraculously stop it 2 or 3 meters outside the tank. BO-105CB, not much to say, Recon Helo. Laro CNV, exceptional optics command unit. Recon unit. Very fast, medium stealth. I'd say don't put these things into combat because they only carry a machine gun and no armor. YP-104 does come with a bit of armor, but only really against small arms. It's 2 points around every side with 1 on the top. Comes with the M621 autocannon. Good rate of fire. Don't fire it on the move because it's not really likely to hit anything. M113 CNV 25mm, slightly better autocannon, at least you'd think so, but it's really not. This is a 20mm autocannon that has, as far as damage goes, the same types of AP and HE values. It's slightly more accurate, but it's a lot faster. You're also getting good optics on both of these platforms. So I'm not really sure why you would want to take the 25mm when you can get the 20mm, which is just a faster recon vehicle. Well, okay, maybe one thing, it's amphibious. That might be it. M113 ELINT. ELINT also helps with detecting those locatable units, such as your artillery, the lock distinguishing. This lock tag means that an ELINT unit is more likely to easily find it. It's sort of a electronic spotter. Very good optics. Again, very poorly armored. It only has a machine gun for defense. Don't put it out there where it can easily get killed. This is not an active scout. Then we have the Marcos. Interesting recon unit. Elite level of training. These guys come with, again, not a very high P or high value AP, just 21. 10 of these 83mm heat rockets. Also come with the MTAR and the Negev. And I think that they're going to make a very good Spec Ops team. Behind enemy lines, these guys are going to be quite interesting to use. Because they have the AP to deal with the lightly armored vehicles. But they don't really have the heavy tag, they don't have a heavy anti-tank weapon. Just use them as skirmishers against units behind enemy lines. Then the SICM, just your standard infantry recon group. There's not really a whole lot to say about that. And then the YP-408 CNV and the YP-408 PW RDR radar. Exceptional optics versus good optics. This one is more of an active scout as it has the 25mm autocannon. Good mobility on both of these things, but this thing is just more expensive and has less availability. I'd say park this thing somewhere next to an open field and don't shoot it. Use this one in a push or on flanks. Maybe even to defend your command vehicle. Vehicles. Quite a few that I've already mentioned because they're transports. What I haven't mentioned yet is the Namika. This is another anti-tank option that they have. Top attacking, thank God, because it only has 17 AP. It's guided as opposed to fire and forget. But after you fire these missiles and they hit, you can pretty quickly get away from there. So I'd say it's an upgraded version of the Striker. The Sarath mortar carrier, just your standard mortar. TH495 I have covered, and these two are two different versions of a tow launcher. You have the iTow, which is really outdated. The only real purpose I could see for this unit is one where you use it to engage APS systems or some sort of self-defense systems before you come with the real heavier hitter, such as the Namika or the 765 Pratt, which has the Tow 2, which does 25 AP at better accuracy. Range on both of these could be a problem. 26-25. Yes, you outrange a tank, but not if the tank has an HEGM on it. Helos. There is not a lot to show here. We have the BO-105 Sneb, just a helo with rocket pods. We have the Hull Rudra. This is a more interesting helo. It has rocket pods, it has the Mistral and an autocannon. Again, no HEGMs. The Hull Druv is a transport helo. The Hull HLC or LHC, this is an anti-tank helo. Again, top attacking. I'm not sure if it's the same missile. Yeah, it's the same missile. It's the same Naga missile that the Namika fires. But this one can scoot across the terrain a bit more faster. 310 kph versus 70. So this helo is more of a fast solution that can close gaps and quickly take out enemy armor. Keep in mind that the stabilizer is alright at 45%, but not great. And then the Mi-35. Standard Mi-35 gunship. Autocannons, rocket pods, Kokon missile. Kokon does okay damage at 23, but good luck trying to completely disable a tank with this thing. And then the Mi-17 V5 is just a transport. Air then. Again, not a lot of anti-tank options here, but the anti-tank options that they do have are pretty good. This could be one of them. This is the F-16A Block 10. It has cluster munitions, which means that these things will always hit. That is, they cannot be blocked by something like an APS. They're always going to do damage. But getting the jet to the target is going to be a challenge. It only has 20% ECM. Strength is alright, as with most aircraft, it's 12. Turn radius is good. You can use this thing with the shorter range AIM-9Ls in a pinch if you really have to, but I would advise against it. MiG-27ML Bahadur, a bomber, 8 340 kilogram bombs, but they're heat. High explosive anti-tank. I haven't seen this thing yet. This is another cluster bomb. It's just more cluster bombs than the BL-755, but they do... Actually, no, they do slightly more damage. Interesting. You'd say that a smaller bomb would disperse fewer bomblets, which might do less damage. But anyway, this thing has 8 HE. Survivability is slightly better. Turn radius is worse. This thing is not a multi-role aircraft, unlike the Block 10. Then the Jaguar M/S. This is one that you can use against enemy armor. 4.5 kilometer anti-tank range. Thank God that this Naga is fire and forget. Top attacking, so you're going to be doing good damage. And for... I'm not really sure if you'd call it self-defense. This thing has the long-range fire and forget Astra missile. I'd say you could sort of use this thing as an interceptor, because it has a speed of 1400 kilometers per hour. So you can very quickly send this thing to where you're expecting an airstrike, or we can see an aircraft already coming in, and not use the Naga, but use the Astras. Keep in mind that the aircraft might consider launching the Naga at a target that happens to be between you and the enemy airplane, and then says, sorry, I'm Winchester, I'm out of here. In which case the Astra doesn't even get to fire. If you're concerned about that, disable the evac on Winchester, but keep a very close eye on your aircraft. Next we have the, for some reason both named the Hull Tejas. The 140.1 is armed with a glide bomb. These things can be shot down. They deal quite a lot of damage, 20 HE, very good range, Means that these things can be, well, pretty much thrown off the aircraft as soon as it spawns in. Also comes equipped with those 2 longer range Astra missiles. The other HAL for 115 points. Again, 2 Astras and 2 Paveways, which do less damage, but are possibly more accurate. I haven't tested this. I'm not sure about... these are laser guided. Yeah, they're both laser guided tags. I'd say the hull T-Just for 140 points just gets you slightly more HE damage than the 115.1. Also, Spectre, please rename one of these aircraft. Because while they do pretty much the same thing, it's hard to distinguish them. Next, MiG-21 Bison. A pretty much modernized version of the MiG-21 for air-to-air warfare. This is a fighter. 2 short-range missiles, 4.2 clicks against aircraft. 8-click missile, long-range derby, 2 of those. You're going to need at least 2 hits with these and 1 with these if you want to kill something. Because most aircraft have 12 strength and this one is no exception. Neither will Red 4 aircraft be. Fortunately, it's easy to call in at 70 points. MiG-29 SE. A MiG-29 turned into a bomber. It seems like the Indian Air Force really likes their Astra missile. 7,700 meter range. Again, the same one as you've seen on pretty much every single aircraft here. Then you have the UPG. This is a better fighter. 9.5 click range with the R77P1. Very accurate. Carries 4 of these. So whereas the MiG-21 Bison might struggle to do damage against an enemy aircraft and shoot it down with all the missiles, this one has a better chance of doing just that. And with a turn radius of just 250, this thing is very, very mobile. Su-30 Mk1. Again, comes with those long-range air-to-air missiles, but this one carries 6 of them, so even more. Also comes with the it's said as Seek missile, GPS-guided seeking missile. Autonomously homes in on active radar sources and artillery platforms, whose position has been triangulated. It will seek out any unit with a lock tag and be guided on them as long as they remain active. This thing carries 3 of those. You're not guaranteed to kill a radar-guided AA platform anymore. Normally when you bring in a seaplane, you just bring it in order to just suppress enemy air defenses or just take them out. Not anymore, as this one just doesn't do that. If the enemy has a couple of AA platforms mixed in between their artillery, there's a very good chance that the Su-30 Mk1 is not going to go for your intended target and kill off an enemy artillery piece instead. Which, well, might even be more beneficial than what you were originally going for. And I'd say with that change to Ashen Shadows in general, having a seed aircraft is just very handy. Because it's such, it's much more of a multi-role aircraft than it used to be. And finally, the Su-57E. Extreme range anti-air warfare. 12.7 clicks, fire and forget, 4 meteors. Pretty decent HE damage. In case you do come up against something at close range, it has 6 Python 5s, as well as a good turn radius and very good speed. Very nice fighter. Now, overall, I'm still a bit concerned about India's anti-tank capability. I haven't tried this deck yet, but you simply don't have too much in the sense of anti-air or anti-tank missiles and airplanes. You're going to rely on cluster munitions, which means that an aircraft has to come much closer than you might feel comfortable with, especially with, almost 11 km anti-airplane missiles. On vehicles, you have some options, such as the Namaka. Helos, some options, but they're still not that good. And the infantry at short range, if you're dealing with, or if you're using something like a Russian deck, you simply don't have something like this. The RPG-7 VR 24 AP. Even a Motor Strelky, if I can find them, come with something that does more damage. You're only paying 7 points for that. So I think it's going to be an interesting situation if you're playing India and you're coming up against an armored deck. Good luck trying to get that thing destroyed, because you're going to need to throw a lot of stuff at that tank before it goes down. Anyway, that concludes India. Let me know by voting through the link in the description which deck you want me to do next. And as for India, if you have a good replay, be sure to send that thing in through the link down in the description. Be sure to make a note in the description of your video or of your replay that it has an A, or that it is recorded with A and S, and preferably which version, so that I know what version of Ashen Shadows to install. Anyway, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon for more videos.